So there are two kinds of people in the world. There are optimists and there are pessimists. And an optimist is someone that looks at the world with a glass half full mentality. Pessimist is obviously someone that looks at the world with a glass half empty mentality. And it's really good if you are a pessimist to be friends with optimists. Or when one day you get married and you're an optimist, it's probably good for you to get married to a pessimist. It's helpful to have a balance, because if you're too optimistic, then you live in la la land, and if you're too pessimistic, you spend your time worrying about life and thinking about worst case scenarios all the time. And so when I got married to someone that is different than me, and one of us is an optimist and one of us is a pessimist, and I think it's probably pretty obvious to tell who is who in that relationship. But I see the world glass half empty. I'm a pessimist, and Karina is the eternal optimist. And so we have lots of discussions where we view the same situation completely differently. And one of the really annoying places that we see the world differently is whenever she's watching me watch sports. My team will be down, they'll get blown out, they'll lose really bad, and she's like, "It's okay, they'll do better next time, don't worry about it, everything is okay." And I'm like, "No, they just lost by like 30, that's not good. It's okay, next game, you'll get them again." And so we see the world two completely different ways, which is actually a really, really good thing. It's a balance. And last week we studied the book of Proverbs, and Proverbs is the optimistic book. It thinks about wisdom and about life in a very optimistic way. How you can live life by pleasing God, how you can live life by taking the next step in life to just pursue wisdom in life, in ministry, in family, in business, all of these things. And so Proverbs looks very optimistically at the world. But today we're going to study a book that looks at the world more pessimistically. And that is the book of Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes, you can turn to it right now. Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes. It is the fourth section of our wisdom books that we've been studying here in the Old Testament. But Ecclesiastes is pretty pessimistic. The theme of Ecclesiastes is really that life is pointless and life is meaningless. It seems like a very depressing view of the world. And it sounds, sometimes you read the book of Ecclesiastes, sometimes it sounds like it's not biblical, but the Ecclesiastes is in there to really show that the world, though there's lots of good things, and Proverbs talks about a lot of those good things, Ecclesiastes talks about the bad things and talks about how ultimately all of these things that we think are good are actually not as good as we think they are, and they're actually a complete waste if we are not spending our time focusing and putting the meaning in life in the right thing. And obviously the answer to that question is God. So we're going to be studying just the emptiness of the world, the pointlessness of the world tonight, so that we can see just the point and the meaning and the worth and the value in God. And so I would love for you guys to open up to the book of Ecclesiastes, Ecclesiastes chapter 1. We don't really have necessarily a text that we're going to camp at the whole night. We're going to kind of look at the whole book together. We're going to be flipping around a lot, but hopefully it'll be helpful for us as we come off the sermon last week from the book of Proverbs to look at a very optimistic view of wisdom. It's helpful for us to see also the pessimistic side of it as well. And so it starts off here in Ecclesiastes chapter 1. I need to pull it up as well. But we meet this guy, and it just says he is a teacher. And so oftentimes we'll talk about Ecclesiastes, and most people will say that Ecclesiastes was written by Solomon, and most likely, based on just the evidence inside of the book of Ecclesiastes, it's probably Solomon, but we don't know that for sure. He says in the beginning, he says, the words of the preacher, the son of David, a king in Jerusalem. So this is a guy who is somehow related to David. He's a son of David, whether that's a grandson, a great-grandson, or whether it's his actual son, Solomon. He's a king, and we'll see in this book that he's got a lot of stuff going for him. He has a lot of life experience. So it's really important for you, and even for me as a young person, to look at people and to learn from people that are much more experienced than you. You want older people in your life, and hopefully your leader is someone that you look up to, an older person in your life that has more life experience than you, that you are looking to glean wisdom from, and that's who this person is here, so probably Solomon. So let's read just the first couple verses here. But basically, he uses this word vanity all over the place. And basically this word just means a complete waste. It's empty, pointless, meaningless. So let's read the first couple of verses here together. It says, the words of the preacher, the son of David, the king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south, it goes to the north. Around and around goes the wind, and on its circuit the wind returns. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full, to the place where the streams flow, and there they flow again. All things are full of weariness. A man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. And there is nothing new under the sun. Is there such a thing of which it is said, see, this is new? It has been already in the ages before us. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be remembrance of later things yet to be among those who come after. This is a very depressing introduction to this book, basically telling us in these first couple of verses that everything is worthless, everything is vanity, all is vanity, he says in verse 2. And there's nothing to be gained under the sun. There's nothing to live for, is basically what the author is telling us here, which sounds very depressing, but it's important for you as a Christian, someone who's trying to live their life the way that God wants you to live, to look at the world with the eyes of meaninglessness. And I don't mean in a just depressing way where you're sad all the time, but you're acknowledging that ultimately there is no intrinsic, valuable worth in the world. And so you can write it down this way for point number 1. It's helpful to think through this. Write this down for point number 1. Acknowledge the meaninglessness of life. Acknowledge the meaninglessness of life. Acknowledge the meaninglessness of life. He starts this section by saying that nothing matters. All is vanity. This word vanity is basically, the Hebrew word is this idea of a breath or a vapor. You think about, I don't know, like a Fabarez can or something like that. You spray it, you see it in the air for a couple seconds, and then it vanishes. And so what he's trying to say here is that life, all of these things that you think are good, they're like a breath. They're a mirage. They're nothing. They're very transitory. There's not real, nothing to be gained. There's nothing to profit here in the world. You could be the richest person, the wisest person, the most successful person, and ultimately what this book is telling us is that all adds up to nothing because life is short. He says in a very depressing way, verse 11 here, that basically no one's going to remember anything you did. Talking about you're going to die. There's nothing new. Verse 10 here. Everything that's been done that you do today, it's already been done before. There's nothing new. There's nothing innovative. Everything is ultimately meaningless in and of itself. And so he goes through a couple different things throughout the book. And we can talk about that here in a minute. But I want you to think about spending your life for something that doesn't matter. Spending your time, your energy, your effort for something that doesn't matter. I remember back in college, Karina and I, we went to the same college in Kentucky, and she was studying to be a teacher at the time, a long, long time ago. She was studying to be a teacher, and halfway through her studies, our school decided to pull the accreditation from the teachers department. When accreditation is that big word that basically shows that your diploma means something. It holds some sort of value. And so when your high school is accredited, your junior high is accredited, you get this diploma at the end so that you can go to the next thing. And your college will look at your high school diploma, see that your high school diploma is accredited, is real, that you're meeting all the curriculum that the state requires your school to meet. So then, therefore, your diploma, your certificate at the end, it actually means something, and you can go somewhere in life. And so, when Karina was studying to be a teacher, they said, "We're not accredited anymore. So your paper, your diploma that you get at the end of this, it means absolutely nothing." And so, basically, everyone kind of dropped out. Everyone, like a bunch of people transferred, a bunch of people left the school, a bunch of people changed their major because they're all working for something that basically they said, this piece of paper is meaningless. You go try to be a teacher with this degree, no one will accept you. You'll never get a teacher job if you come with this degree, which sounds like a really pointless thing to do in college, to work for a degree that is basically a piece of paper and it has no worth in it. And so the book of Ecclesiastes is showing you are working right now in your life for basically a piece of paper that means nothing. It has no accreditation behind it. It has no valuable worth behind it. And you can imagine that in high school, if you found out your high school is not accredited and you'll never get into college when you graduate high school, it'd be a pretty depressing thing to go waste your time and your effort on schoolwork if you know that it's not going to pay off at all. And that's really the theme of the book of Ecclesiastes. You can turn over to chapter 3. We see it a little bit more in chapter 3. You can go to Ecclesiastes chapter 3, look at verse 19. You've got those 4 little bullet points on your worksheets there, 4 different subpoints, 4 different things. There's a lot more than that, but 4 different things I want to talk about tonight that the book of Ecclesiastes says is vanity, is worthless, is a breath, is a mist, is a vapor. Chapter 3, verse 19, Solomon, or the author, writes, "For what happens to the children of man and what happens to the beast is all the same. As one dies, so dies the other. And they all have the same breath, and man has no advantage over the beast, for all is vanity. All go to one place, and all are from the dust, and to dust all will return. Who knows whether the spirit of man goes upward, and the spirit of the beast goes down into the earth? So I saw that there is nothing better than the man should rejoice in his work, for that is his lot. Who can bring him to see what he will have after him?" There's this idea of you are from dust and you are going to dust. And so the first vanity, really, that the book of Ecclesiastes is talking about is life itself. So you can write down the vanity of life. Basically what he's trying to say here in the book of Ecclesiastes is your life, ultimately, you're here for a time, for a couple years on this planet Earth, and then you die. You're going to die. Every person in this room is going to die, the book of Ecclesiastes said. And so he really puts that kind of depressing mood over the whole book, that everything you do in life, you are going to die. It is all temporary. And I think right now in our world of COVID, where we've got all these different regulations with school, with church, with, grocery stores and, sporting events and all these things, we have all these rules and regulations. And I know that sometimes you might complain or grumble about those, which is something that we shouldn't be doing. But if you think about all of those regulations, they're all temporary. They didn't burn down or destroy Angel Stadium because no one's going to be able to go to an Angel game, because those seats are going to eventually be filled by people when we get back to normal. Your masks, you're not going to wear them forever. Your schools, you're not going to have those little plastic things around your desk forever. You're not going to have to go to the grocery store with all these rules forever. They're temporary, and so for you to sit here and complain about them, it's not a big deal, because eventually in a couple months or next year or whatever, things are going to, quote-unquote, go back to normal. And so because it's not a permanent thing, because these are temporary rules, we view those differently. If they said you have to wear a mask for the rest of your life, or you can never go to a sporting event for the rest of your life, or you can never go, a grocery store will never be filled again, then maybe we could be upset. But because it's temporary, it's probably not something worth complaining about. And so the idea here is he's talking about life, that your life, it's temporary. And something you don't think about often as a teenager is you are going to die one day. And the best case scenario is that some people remember your name. The best case scenario is you show up in a history book. The best case scenario is that they make a statue of you someday. If you're really, really successful, maybe they'll make a statue of you and put it somewhere. But that's best case scenario in terms of the meaning of your life. So that's the first vanity, that your life is transitory. It's temporary. You're going to die soon. The next thing, turn over to chapter 2. We see the vanity, you can write it down this way for the second subpoint there, the vanity of fun, the meaninglessness of fun. You can turn over to chapter 2, looking at the first 3 verses. Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verses 1 through 3 talks about the meaninglessness of fun, of pleasure, of enjoyment. Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verse 1, it says, "I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasure, enjoy yourself." Basically what he's saying to himself here is, I will give you anything you could possibly want. Talking to himself. He says, "Behold, this was vanity. I said of laughter, it's mad, and of pleasure, what use is it? I searched my heart, how to cheer my body with much wine, my heart still guiding me with wisdom, and how to lay a hold of folly, till I might see what was good for the children of man to do under heaven during the few days of their life." What he's saying here is, I went after fun. I went after pleasure. And see, that's something that you will deal with increasingly. In junior high, I'm sure you've been pressured before to go try a vape or something like that. I'm sure you've been pressured before to go to a party you shouldn't go to. In high school, it gets worse. In college, it gets worse. And you're going to continually be pressured to go after the quote-unquote fun things of this world, the pleasurable things of this world. And what he's saying here is that it is all worthless. I want you to think right now of the example of alcohol. That's one of the things he talks about here. He talks about wine. You think about alcohol for a minute. What happens to people when they drink a lot of alcohol? They get super drunk and they pass out, they throw up, and they wake up the next morning and they feel terrible. The fun that this alcohol promised of having a good time, having a fun weekend, turns out into throwing up, blacking out, waking up on someone else's couch and feeling terrible the next day. This very temporary thing of quote-unquote pleasure that the world tries to get you to go after, it leaves you emptier than you found it. It never fills you up. It ultimately is worthless. And I think about the most popular people in high school, the people that had the most quote-unquote fun in high school, and those are always, frankly, the biggest losers in life. Like, I just think of the people in my high school that were so popular, and they're still, not working a job. They still, live at home. They have no plan for their life because they put all of their attention, all of their effort into their high school years or their college years or whatever it is. And the vanity of fun is proven not only by just the Bible, but also logic. It never pays off. And he goes on here in the rest of chapter 2. We don't have time to read everything, but he talks about all these great things that he does, all this great wealth that he's built up, all these projects, all this stuff that he has. And so you can write this down for the third subpoint here, the vanity of success, the meaninglessness of success. It ultimately doesn't satisfy. Successfulness never satisfied. I was just reading the story of Jeff Bezos, the CEO of Amazon, who's got basically the biggest company in the whole world. Amazon, it literally has taken over the world. And he just stepped down because he was just kind of bored of it. He was just like, I'm going to go do other stuff. I reached the top of the mountain. It's cool, I guess, but I'm going to go try something else. He was just done with it. He kind of had given up on it. And he's, in the mind of the world, the most successful man on the planet. He's got the most money. He's got the most, people working for him. He's really, really successful in the eyes of the world. But it ultimately never filled him up. It ultimately didn't bring him the satisfaction that it promised. And right now you've got all of these goals in life, whether it's grades, whether it's sports, whether it's music, whether it's getting into college, whether it's getting a nice job or whatever it is. You've got these aspirations, but ultimately you put in your trust that those aspirations will do any sort of fulfillment, any sort of satisfaction, any sort of filling you up. It won't fill you up. You can be the most successful person, the richest person, the person with the most fun, the person with the dream job, the person that fill in the blank, has whatever you are thinking right now in your mind of, it would be nice if I could have this. That successful person that you're picturing in your mind, they still feel like they don't have it. They still see the meaninglessness of life. The fourth one, it's kind of in this text here, but also talks further in chapter 5, is the vanity of money. The vanity of money. The vanity of life, the vanity of fun, the vanity of success, and the vanity of money. These are all meaningless, the book of Ecclesiastes says. You can think of Solomon, probably Solomon. He's got the most money. He's got the world at his fingertips. And he says it's completely unsatisfying. You could lose it at any moment. People hate him because he has a lot of money, and it's completely temporary. You think right now about money. Money has an expiration date. You can make as much money as you want. You can think it provides you the most comfort and the most happiness that you want. But ultimately, it leads to no happiness at the end of it. I was just watching this video this week, this YouTube video that asked the question, does money buy happiness? And it asked all of these different people with no salary to like a multi-million-dollar. And the more money the person had, the more they said money does not buy happiness. And I thought it was interesting. The person that was making no money said, yes, money will buy my happiness. But the rich people said, no, money didn't buy me any kind of happiness. I feel completely depressed. I feel empty, broken, lonely inside. Money never has the meaning that you might think that it does. The book of Jeremiah, you can write down Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 13. It calls all of these things broken cisterns. Broken cisterns. cistern is like a well. You think about a well that's broken, not giving you the water. You think of like drinking a cup with holes in the bottom of the cup. You're trying to fill yourself up, but you're never able to fully get there. And I think about all these vanities here: fun, success, money, just life itself, whatever it is. I think about monopoly money. Monopoly money, it holds value for a very short period of time. All of these things, having a lot of monopoly money in the game of Monopoly is awesome. But as soon as the game's over, that money means absolutely nothing. All of the fun, all of the success, all of the money, all of the experiences that you have in life, it's like Monopoly money, where it holds no value as soon as the game is over, because from dust you came, to dust you shall return, Ecclesiastes says. And this book is really depressing for a really, really good reason, to show you that the things that the world is trying to offer you, the fun, the success, the money, just the experiences that the world tries to offer you, it ultimately leads to nothing. It leads to no happiness. It leads to no joy. It leads to no satisfaction. And so when you're tempted by those things, remember that all is vanity. The guy who had everything, Solomon, who had all the money, all the fame, all the success, everything, the world at his fingertips, says, I had it all and it was all worthless. But the book of Ecclesiastes, it doesn't stay depressing. It actually ends very optimistically. You can turn over to the 12th chapter, the last chapter, Ecclesiastes chapter 12. It provides the meaning to the meaninglessness of life. The theme of the book has been, nothing will satisfy you. All is vanity. But the solution to that depressive mindset is God. Ecclesiastes chapter 12. Look at verse 1. Remember, this is an old, wise guy teaching young men, young women. Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 1, it says, Remember also your Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days come and the years draw near, of which you will say, I have no pleasure in them. Before the sun, the light, and the moon, stars are darkened, clouds return to its rain, and then he goes on and on and on about the things that will happen to you when you get old. But the point in verse 1 is, remember your Creator in the days of your youth. The meaning to the meaninglessness of life is God. So you can write it down this way for point number 2. Find real worth in God alone. Find real worth in God alone. Find real worth in God alone. This is something that Jesus talks about often. We studied it over the summer, the I am statements of Jesus, but in John chapter 6, John 6:35, Jesus calls himself the bread of life. He says, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me shall not hunger, and whoever believes in me shall never thirst. Jesus promises that satisfaction, that joy, that fulfillment that the book of Ecclesiastes says that you will not find in the world. And so the point being, if you are a young person, which everyone in this room is considered a young person, remember your Creator in your youth. Spend your time now working, serving the one thing that has meaning. And the one thing that has meaning is God. Spend your time doing that. People ask Jesus, what is the most important commandment in the law? And Jesus, without hesitation, he says the greatest and the first commandment is that you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. That's Matthew chapter 22. You need to spend your time right now as a teenager loving the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. Spending your energy, spending your time, serving God, loving God, obeying God, fearing God. And I know you hate to hear this from people that are older than you because you've heard it a million times. I am not the first and I will not be the last. But right now you have more time than you'll ever have in your life. And I know you roll your eyes, you're like, oh, I've heard that a million times. But it is true. You have more time right now than you'll ever have in your life. Maybe until you're retired. And you are that old man teaching other young men and women. But you want to be making sure that you are using your time for God. And I want you to think right now about your schedule. Think about your agenda. Think about the way that you spend your week. The way that you spend your summer, maybe when you have even more time. What are you spending your time on? Things that have worth, things that we saw in point number 1, or things that we see in point number 2. Using your youth to spend time remembering, serving, loving, and obeying God. he ends the book, the last two verses, 13 and 14. Look down at the bottom of the page. He says, with this conclusion at the end of the book, he says, "For the end of the matter, all has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment, and with every secret thing, whether good or evil." The point of Ecclesiastes is all is meaningless, but you, if you want meaning, is to do these two things. Fear God, keep his commandments. We talked about what it looks like to fear God last week. We want to be making sure that that is something that you are doing, spending your time obeying God, because that is better than serving the world. We don't have time to turn there. You can write down Psalm 16. Psalm 16, 8 through 11. You're going to read it in small groups. But this is basically where David, or the psalmist, is talking about his joy, his ultimate joy and satisfaction and fulfillment is in God alone. Don't let your life go to waste. Don't waste your teenage years. Don't waste your life pursuing the things that Solomon says are vanity. Don't let your life go to waste. I was reading the story of this guy in San Francisco. He was this investor. Maybe you saw this story recently. But he was an early investor in Bitcoin, and he has, I want to say it was something like 7,000 Bitcoins, which I think equals like $220 million or something like that. And it's in this account that he forgot the password to. And he's got 10 tries before the software just deletes itself. And so he's on try 8 or try 9. So he's got like 2 left. And he's got $220 million in this account that he doesn't know the password to. And you can't just do the little link that says forget your password ? You can't do that. He's got $220 million in it. And he doesn't know the password. And I think, wow, what a waste. All it would take is that little password. With those numbers, those letters, with all of those characters, just a small little password would unlock $220 million of wealth. I think it's just that little small thing that provides really the access to the value, the access to the worth. So your life is a complete waste, You've forgotten the password, if you will. If you spend your life living for this world, living for yourself, doing whatever you want to do and not what God wants you to do, it will mean nothing. You will waste this $220 million sitting in this account. Just a simple password. Just a simple, God, I am sorry. I want to live for you. I want to turn from my sin. I want to place my faith in you. Instead of living for the vanities of this world, the wastefulness, the meaninglessness of the world, I want to live for you instead. It's very, very simple, just like that password. But that password unlocks this incredible wealth. It's a complete waste to sit here and say, I don't know the password, whatever, it's fine. The password is right there. The password is finding your real worth in God alone, not in this world. So I'm excited to talk about that here in small groups. So if you would bow your heads right now, pray with me, and we'll hop into small groups here in a sec. God, we live in such a depressing world. God, the book of Ecclesiastes is, though pessimistic, it's very true. It's rooted in reality that the things of this world will not come to pass, will not provide real value, real worth. We're going to live our lives. We're going to have kids. We're going to pass on, a couple dollars here and there to our next generation. Hopefully some wisdom as well. But God, that's it. If we think specifically with just the glasses and the perspective of this world alone, we can't take anything with us. God, I pray right now for these students who are standing really at the beginning of their life, where they can choose to spend their lives on worthless things, on things that will not provide any real value, fulfillment, joy, or they can spend their life living and serving you, fearing you and keeping your commandments for the rest of their life. God, protect them from wasting their life, letting this $220 million sit in their account and never be used. But God, I pray that you would radically transform these hearts and minds and lives, that they might add meaning, add value, add worth to their life because they live and they want to serve you. Because we know that only what we do for you, only the obedience and the fearing of you really ultimately matters in the grand scheme of things, God. I pray that these students would not waste their life, but they would use their lives for the glory of you. We pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.